discuss.
Can I be greedy and have a second question?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
How many of your kids this year are going to be girls?
You might just want to speak loudly because it'll be very hard for me to run everyone.
Yeah, this is, therein lies the problem. IT is compulsory. Is that one? IT is compulsory, so therefore everybody's taking it. Of the people that have chosen computer science, 2 girls.
Yeah, because I think that's also, as an industry and as academics, that's one of our challenges. You know, we talked about the numbers going down of kids going into computer science at university level, which has been a Scottish phenomenon as well as an English phenomenon. But the problem we really face is also inclusion. It's not an inclusion of people from different economic backgrounds. It's getting women into this workplace as well. And actually, some of the things you were talking about just then, maybe I'm not sure girls will buy into that. I think we have got a challenge there. And I'm interested to hear what some of the other panelists say.
So I'd like to think that 13-year-old me would kind of fit exactly into your demographic, because we were really poor. And I mean, like, my dad gambled a lot, and we never, I saved up enough pocket money when I was 13, 14 to buy a second-hand Spectrum, because that was the only thing I could afford, and bought books, and I didn't even have a supportive IT teacher. I just sort of went and borrowed a basic book programming and just taught myself in the bedroom, like you were talking about, and so it's interesting what you were talking about in terms of cash incentives. I certainly think that's a good thing. But none of my friends cared. Like, none of my friends cared. They just thought, like, I didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't show anyone about it. It was just something that I did for a laugh. And it wasn't until I got to 17 until my mum said, all right, well, you know, it looks like you spend a lot of time on the computer. And I said, yes, that's right, yeah, I should really do computer science, and I did. And it wasn't until I was 6 months away from coming here to do computer science until she actually bought me a real computer, and I could, you know, do real things with it. So I think some of those things work. I think some of those things don't work. But I think in regards to getting more women and more girls into programming, I think role models is the huge thing. Like, how many, like, I don't know any, like, good, amazing female programmers that are, like, famous when I was 13. I'm not quite sure I'd know, well, I know a few amazing computer scientists, but not ones that I kind of, maybe, I'm maybe still struggling for that if someone asked me that right now.
Well, so. I know you have a strong views in this as well. You're heavily involved in this, yeah.
Yeah, well, I really think that a lot of the teaching methods that primary school that we've known about for an awful long time that encourage creativity and encourage learning across disciplines is where it's going to happen. If you have mixed gender groups doing something creative with a Raspberry Pi, you know, that uses a range of skills, not just computing skills, not just those skills peculiar to the Apple Pi, but might include knowledge from biology or wherever. I think that is really how we're going to encourage girls into learning this kind of stuff. I mean, it works. When I was teaching in university, it was that kind of format that we used. You know, set a brief. You've got groups of 5 students, mainly mixed gender groups working together. Peer-to-peer learning. Everybody learns a bit from that. That's much later on, but if we're doing that at an early stage, which I think this enables us to do, then I think there's a huge opportunity there.
This is another question about girls really for the panel. With Raspberry Pi, when we've taken it into schools with very little kids, sort of pre-adolescent kids, we've found that there's been a nice gender ratio of interested children. You know, there doesn't really seem to be a problem for the girls until they hit about 11, 12. And I'm wondering if any of you can identify what cultural things you think might be happening to put them off when they're 11 or 12, because there's definitely something that flips over when they hit their teenage years.
There's a big recognised and well-known psychological development that happens around 8 or 9, where girls start to identify as girls and boys start to identify as boys, and they put themselves into deliberate conflict with one another, and that's when you get the whole boys smell sort of thing, and girls are all, into pretty things. And that's when you start seeing the divide happening actually much earlier than 11 or 12. So I think that's where the big problem is. And it's in trying to, associating those kind of skills and that kind of knowledge with also being feminine. Because at the moment we've got a massive problem in society, and to imagine that it's just around computers is just nonsense. Look at what happens in fashion, for God's sake. We're seeing people who are bulimic on the catwalk. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So
we've had people approach
this
us
is an outcome, not a cause.
To bring girls in, make it pink.
Yes. How infuriating is that?
But that's what I've seen with the older girls, that if you actually, if sometimes if you give them sessions which you say, this is just for girls, they'll say, well, I don't want to do that. Why are you discriminating against me? It's such a complicated problem, and we're really feeling our way around it at the moment.
Well, to imagine that just tackling it at the bottom will work is ridiculous. To imagine that it's just one form of media, computing and games, is ridiculous. It's happening through every form of media, every form. And we have to see a change in society, and there's no straightforward answer to this. It's going to take a long time, and everybody has to get involved.
I want to see serious lady scientists on television.
It'd be a good start, yeah.
I was involved in a thing called Computer Club for Girls, which was a Channel 4 initiative. It was very interesting the way that developed, because when we opened the doors through design for girls who wanted on the creative kick, they wanted to do fashion. And so in other words, the creative thing was a sort of double-edged sword, As soon as you allow people to be content-driven, as opposed to the pure coding sort of world I remember, where I was excited by just producing series of prime numbers and stuff, like, wow, you feel like God type thing. When you come from the content angle, suddenly you get the big gender divide swooping in almost immediately. You can see it happening in front of you, and that's one of the big problems, I think. How do you place this stuff in schools on the content versus pure coding side?
And there is this relevance thing which always makes me queasy, that there's a suggestion that to appeal to girls we need to make it relevant to some external thing, to climate change or helping the poor, or that it needs to be put in some sort of social content that's particularly appealing to girls. I'm really interested. I don't know whether that's real or not. I don't know. It's frequently suggested to us, and I don't know whether it's true or whether it's just an idea that happens to be quite appealing, and so people repeat it a lot.
I think research has shown that if you include those other things like climate change or helping the poor, actually everybody gets more involved. It's not just the girls. So I think that if you want to make things more relevant to everybody and include a much more diverse group of people, then you should be doing that integrated learning, integrating disciplines, and making it useful for everybody. But I do think there's an interesting thing in society just now which reflects just exactly this idea of like the white middle class male pie that you were discussing earlier, which is that even as adults and fully formed human beings, we're seeing men at the higher end, like in terms of like what they can earn income wise, but also at the very lowest end, and girls are tending to be in the middle ground for some reason, and that to me is a really interesting thing as well.
I was going to say just on the back of that, I think sometimes people think that sometimes people forget that programming is basically being able to create objects and design objects that are in code. And my excitement was the fact that I like be after the 10, print name, and go back and do that a load of times. I was really excited by the fact that I could create like anything I wanted inside this computer, and it was just like, you could create a bridge, and it could be anything. It could be any color. It could be big. It could be small. It could like do lots of things. And I think sometimes getting that message across to girls that actually it is design. It just happens to be design which you have to like specify quite clearly exactly what you want. And I think that's really, like, I don't understand why programming is it's never talked about in those terms.
Can I make a comment on this? I'm not a woman, obviously, but I'm so qualified. But it's a more general problem, isn't it, about inclusivity? It's not, maybe there's an issue that there aren't enough females getting into some of these technical and science subjects, but it's an inclusivity issue that covers not just females. One of a lot of the subjects that have this problem are very hierarchical. You described how you'd like to teach this topic, and that means that if you fall off the escalator at some point, it's very difficult to get back on again. And that kind of reflects on the way that we structure education in classrooms, that people help follow this year-on-year process through schools. And this discussion is a little bit about what the impact of technology is going to be on education. You mentioned the attainment gap when you were talking. I mean, I would imagine that the impact of all these great technologies and the ability of people to learn on their own at home is going to be that attainment gap is going to get bigger and bigger, because some people are going to learn some subjects really, really well and not others, and vice versa. And I think it's a question as to whether that's a bad thing or a good thing. The attainment gap's a great thing for the people who are making those attainments. Mm-hmm. And if our schools worked in a different way, where you progress through the school based on competency rather than on age, that wouldn't matter so much, and it also might allow people to get back onto the escalator at a later stage, that if they do drop out at a certain age for whatever reasons, that they can come back in again later and re-engage when it suits them. And so I think that's going to be a huge impact that technology will have on education, and I can't wait for it to happen. But if you're really smart in one subject and you're really enthusiastic about it, you can whiz through it very quickly, and if you're slower, you can go through at the pace that suits you, so in the end you do come out with the same level of knowledge and skills as the faster moving student.
It does feel like a weakness of certainly the English education system, is that we don't have the whole Leibniz and stuff that some, like the German education system. You can stay back a year, and a large enough proportion of people stay back a year that it's not such awful stigma.
Exactly.
And a large enough number of people have moved forwards a year that it's not, again, some terrible social stigma.
Exactly.
And that
and in subjects like maths and engineering and so on, that is so critical. If you're lacking those foundation building blocks and you move into primary 2, primary 3, that's you. You know, you're done for 10 years now.
And likewise, if you're doing well and you exhaust the material and you're forced to spend a year cooling your heels, that can take the momentum out.
Exactly, and it's known to have a really bad impact. There's research on that. Students who coast through the latter years of their secondary education don't develop the work ethic that they require to do well at university and drop off at university. It's a known effect.
Can empathise with that. It took me a long time.
So anyway, that was my contribution to the female debate.
It's very interesting. I heard it was a medical education conference where I had some physicians make a very strong case for being too utopian on this. And they were quoting stark figures around autism and the more systematic type thinking that you get, which is I think is a 7-to-1 ratio male to female. In other words, you will already have in the population a bias towards males for very abstract, systematic thinking. And in other words, there's hardly any doctor who would believe that sex is just a social construct. And that we'd be hopelessly utopian to imagine that on coding we're going to have 50-50. I don't know, you guys who work in computer science, but you know, would you see that in your lifetime? The interesting thing is, in the early days of the internet, when I used to go to tech conferences, they were massively weighted towards men. I give a lot of talks at conferences around the whole e-learning and technology and education, and like this, it's a pretty even split. Because the thing's matured now into the human application of the technology and not raw coding. That's good. I'm glad the raw coding in a sense is still there, and I really love those people. But I'm glad it's matured into a broad church now, where there is genuinely, not a utopian hope that it will be, actually this audience is fairly represented. There's pretty good gender mix here, because we're talking about the application of technology for human good, and not necessarily raw bot men stuff in physics departments and in computer science departments. I just think it was a really healthy dose of realism for me when I heard that stat stated to me, saying no matter how hard you try, it won't happen.
Well, let me be oppositional. Italy. I'm in vastly higher representation of women in computer science departments in Italy. Some really amazing Italian female computer scientists, and not on the soft side, on the really, really hard side. And I often wonder whether, I like that. I like that argument, and there is this argument that the bell curve is a different shape for largely in standard deviation for men than in the position of the mean. But certainly, if you look at some non-Anglo societies, they have managed to get very large numbers of women into computing and engineering, and I just wonder why that is. I wonder what it is about our society that there are psychological development issues which are presumably constant, but there's obviously something else as well there, because we really don't half flush the girls out of hard sciences.
What has Italy done to do that then?
I don't know. Just when you go to an Italian university computer science department, it's full of women.
Maybe the UK has the most broken family structure, so maybe having that grounding, they feel free to be able to do this sort of thing.
I think we have to be a bit careful. We're just picking one country to make the argument from one probability.
But it's also true in Asia.
Yeah.
Or you go to China.
Yeah. But it feels like it's, and almost feels maybe like it's even more of an England, more of a UK problem. Really sorry. I like the unit.
Put some light on it for you. The status of women in engineering, there was a study done in the 70s, mid-70s. The engineer in Britain comes from engineering, the man with the oily rag.
Yeah.
In Europe, it's ingenieur, it's entrepreneurial, the status is far higher. And it's history, it's our history. That's where engineers derive from engineering in Britain.
Yeah.
And the status has always been the status of an engineer as opposed to doctors, lawyers, accountants, law. Always been.
Mucky.
I think there's another.
I'm not saying it's right.
No, it's gone.
There is something else happening, because as admission selector over about 15 years, I have seen 1 in 4 applicants and students being female to 1 in 10.
Yeah.
So there is something. It's not just societal. It's some.
What happened?
Thank you. There's actually quite a lot of research being done on equality in general, and where there's a great disparity within the society, then you'll find that gender issues are more extreme. And so in the UK, we're actually finding that there's really quite a large difference between those who are rich and poor compared to some other countries. And that is considered to be one of the strong things that are pushing us apart, basically. But it's supposed to work on a number of different issues as well, over health and over a number of other issues.
But you suggested that is the reason that 1 in 4 entrance to computer science has dropped to 1 in 10.
I think there's a strong argument for it.
Therefore, when Raspberry Pi, because it's so much more affordable, will hope to address that gender imbalance.
I think it will do, but I think the thing is that it has to do it at all areas of society. At the moment, we've got this incredible focus on children, and while I don't want to say let's take the money from the kids, I do think there's a big issue, because what we've done is we've pulled money away from adult education, which means that what we're going to end up with is this big gap that then those kids have to wait. There's going to be like a 10-year gap before that we can make up for that again. And all the work that has been done at those different levels is going to be lost, because there's no investment in that kind of diversity at later age groups and in different parts of society.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this before we came in, right? And it's just the damage that's been done to lifelong education over the last decade is staggering, and even more kind of upsetting when you look at the BBC Computer Literacy Project. I always thought, because I was a child when I had my BBC Micro, I always thought the BBC Micro was a machine for children. But when you go back and look, and there's a wonderful Nesta-funded study just coming out of the Science Museum, Tilly Blythe has just done this wonderful study. The BBC Computer Literacy Project was a project primarily for adults. Was about reskilling people who were in this kind of sunset industries, giving people something new they could do, and the diversion over the last decade of resource from adult education to box ticking to trying to get more people through some artificial line in secondary education has just been very distressing.
What's the gender balance like in your department?
1 in 10.
I mean, your faculty.
Oh, faculty. Well, I'm computer science, so it's 1 in 10. If you go to pharmacy, it's 9 in 10, 8 in 10.
And do you think
you
that
go to chemistry, it's 6 in 10. You go to physics, it might be 3 in 10.
Do you think that has an impact on your ability to recruit?
Yeah, it's an
candidates?
engineering thing. I think computer science is seen as engineering. If you look at the engineering faculty, electronic engineering, chemical, no, maybe chemical engineering, but electrical and mechanical engineering, 3/4 of our graduates or undergraduates are men. The reality is, if we have female graduates, they're much more likely to get good job offers because they have skills which aren't just technical skills. In fact, our female graduates are amongst the best that we produce. And it's a sad fact that we don't have these role models to allow kids at school, primary, secondary, to actually see that this is a fantastic career. You have flexible working, you can take a gap, you can work from home. It's creative. Have we seen Kate talking about that, and Maura talking? It's a wonderful career progression, but that story is not getting down into schools.
If this is true, this engineering story, isn't the danger that the Raspberry Pi that looks like a hardcore motherboard would have the very opposite effect?
No, I don't think that at all.
In other words, it just reinforces the hardcore
No,
engineering
because
message.
you're going to get primary school kids doing bits of robotics and stuff like that. Liz has talked about that. They're going into schools. They're seeing the impact of the
Kids
Raspberry
actually
Pi.
really like the bare board.
Yeah. And girls. Girls really like it.
They like them to point different things on there and say, yeah, that's the system on the chip, there's the memory.
The real risk is when you have...
I've kind of got this microphone here. I've been trying to ask a question for 10 minutes. But it's just really kind of to echo what's been said, and kind of mention something myself and Morna talk about. If you want girls at 12, 11, 12 to pick up the Raspberry Pi, rename it the Creative Pi, and they'll do it. Like, it's pretty horrible, but that's what happened. But my real question is, like, for everyone, there's quite, as it's been said before, there's a lot of focus on children. Now, me and quite a hell of a lot of other guys in games development and doing the hardcore programming stuff, like AI stuff, you know, not just like kind of stuff that I do, just like game design, failed everything at school. So they went ahead and just learned it themselves. So I think there's probably a bit too much of a focus on kids being taught, because once you reach past 16, 17, 18, no one cares about you, and I just wonder if, like, what people's thoughts are about that.
Could I?
Yeah, if you want to reply to that. I don't know if you're replying or not.
I think computer programming is I think that one of the good things in terms of making the pie bigger, one of the computer programming is not well correlated, I think, with general academic ability. Ability to be a computer programmer. I know a lot of guys who would be doing manual jobs, but they're instead software engineers, because computer programming isn't actually has such a large element of craft to it that you can be an extremely effective computer programmer on that basis as a craftsman or craftswoman. And so I think that it's a really nice, quick, easy win to expand the pie by promoting craftsmanship.
I was going to really just put in a word for the over 50s and 60s that have never used a computer in their lives. I do a lot of volunteer work in care homes and show people how to use computers, and they ask wonderful questions like where the stamp goes on an email. It can't possibly be free. What do you think society should be doing to help these people that are really pretty much being left alone? You know, that they're not taking advantage of cheaper gas bills and all the rest of it by being able to read their own meter and stick it on the internet?
What do we think needs to be done?
What should society be doing?
They should be teaching and using my software, of course. They should be setting up free classes or sponsoring people to take part. Yes. But, you know, I mean, that's a kind of hard sell, because at the moment we're going through this situation where everything previously was publicly funded, and large organisations like the WEA have just had the carpet pulled from under them. And, you know, that is going to have a lot of damage, there's no doubt about it. But I think there's, you know, like using kind of small modular face-to-face classes is something older people probably respond to quite well. And if there's a way of introducing those cheaply or giving them away for free, in terms of like you know, we could almost package them up as like literacy in, you know, maths to pay your bills or whatever. Those kind of literacy classes would work really well, and that kind of modular. You only need 4 of them in a row to really get a grasp of it. Learn from your friends, keep in touch with them, so next time you've got a problem, you go along and ask. But
I'm kind of
the funding's a big
fan
issue.
of new technologies, things like iPads, which mean that the interface is a lot more simple to use.
Oh, yeah.
Grasp, and maybe that will be the key to this one.
I love Stuart's involved in a project called the Moose and the Goose
Moose and
project.
Goose.
I love that name. For those of you English, you might not get that one. But question at the back.
Yeah. Hi. I'd like to make a general comment, if you like, because I'm not in academics. I'm not a teacher or a professor. I came along today because of the Raspberry Pi. I'm an engineer. I work in industry. I'm also a STEM ambassador, and I'm hoping to have a longer chat with Liz and Eamon afterwards. And I think there's a huge resource that addresses a lot of the points you've been making about role models. As a STEM ambassador and an engineer, I go out to schools and we encourage girls and females to come along to those. And we're beginning to see more and more of that happening. So in case you're wondering what's he talking about, STEM and what have you, I would encourage you to look up STEMnet, and they have access to hundreds and thousands of engineers and people in industry who will come along free of charge and support the schools with all the technology stuff. Thank you.
Just this thing about role models, just to, I mean, when we go out to, I make a real effort to go out to schools and make sure that we talk to kids from, you know, like school leavers to kind of 8, 9 years old to try and like say to them, hey, look, computer programming is cool. I think when I think back to really effective role models, so there's this thing called the Ada Lovelace Day, and each year you're encouraged to write about someone that's really inspired you. I remember the first year that came along because I had to write a blog post about who was my role model, and it's really sad because I struggled for such a long time to think of who that is, and I came up with 2 after like really, really hard thinking. One was, I don't know whether you guys ever watched a program called Bugs, you know, back in the late 90s, and there was like this female character, and she like would pull wires out and do all this stuff, and I thought, oh, she was so cool, I definitely want to be her, right? That was one. And the second one, which shows my like geeky side, was, you know, like when Star Trek decided to have their first kind of female captain, I thought, oh God, she's good at science and she could kick ass. This is like amazing, right? So like, I think there's different role models that we need, and definitely at the local type, because I totally support that, and I think if we could somehow campaign to the BBC to like fit in a
The group of people I work with, we actively encourage our women engineers and technicians to become STEM ambassadors, so that schools and the outside world can see there are women involved. I think it's just about this cultural thing we're talking about, getting the message out there.
Yeah.
I don't think it's trained in, it's just a mindset that's happening. So we actively encourage the females that we work with, come up with us, be a STEM ambassador, so they don't just see the guys doing it.
And that's great. Picking up on the media, if you think about CSI, forensic chemistry, forensic and analytical chemistry, forensics, have had a marvellous increase. If you think about electrical and mechanical engineering, then you've got Scrap Heap Challenge. Think of the media portrayal of computer scientists or engineers, especially female ones. It's not very attractive. And so the media has a role to play in enhancing
get back and then keep
My understanding is that we now have, don't we have too many forensic scientists? I think we've accidentally massively overproduced forensic scientists, and also trained juries to expect the most incredible pyrotechnics from them. So it's accidentally screwed our justice system.
It's a completely unrealistic expectation. The department in my university says if you come to do forensic and analytical chemistry, the likelihood is you will never become a forensic scientist. They actually have to say that because they don't want to have a false premise. But nevertheless, they're massively oversubscribed.
My name is Tim Barnes from University College London. We have a member of computer science faculty where we are by the name of Sue Black, who's done a huge amount to try and promote. There you go. To try and promote this kind of thing. And everybody on that side just nodded. Okay. So yesterday I was in the lecture theatre next door talking about some of the stuff we did and Raspberry Pi, and the rest of this came up talking about Sue and Turing. And she's pushed forward an organisation called the GoTo Foundation. If you have a look at that, just a tweet at GoToFDN, which has a huge amount of this. And one of the lines she uses is if you want to inspire women and girls to get involved in programming, really important thing is that when you start selling Raspberry Pis, there should be a version of it that comes in pink. And if anybody writes it down, she smacks them over the head. Right? Because that's to miss the point. The point is not what is the technology. The geeks and the guys who used to get involved liked it because there were certain aspects of it that were fun and kind of geeky and so on. And what everybody responds to when they go out and do things is not the tech, it's the things you can do with it. And the CSI is one side of it, with apologies, because actually you just gave a really good geeky example, so I don't mean to simplify this in an unpersonal way. But you gave a different example about forensic science. Another one is biochemical engineering. Chemical engineering. Chemical engineering in most university departments was on the decline, seriously into terminal decline. Departments were closing where they existed as a specialisation that was disappearing until about 6 or 7 years ago, and the numbers started to creep up, and nobody exactly knew why. Universities weren't doing anything different. And it was the result of a generation that 5 years earlier were being taught at GCSE level that chemical engineering was the way that we were going to solve problems from global warming to a whole load of other environmental issues, and that was the way that it was going to go, and they'd worked that out for themselves. And it wasn't anything that we did to change the way that the university courses were done, it was to explain why this stuff mattered, and the fact that it was going to be the key to whatever you went to do next. And that was, I think, a key part of what this is, and it's not about patronising say you need to paint pink or do anything else, or necessarily, with respect to the gentleman in the front row, to say it has to be to do with calling Creative Pi or anything else. It's to do with saying this is what you can do with it. And that to me is really what it's about. It's about saying these are different aspects, and whatever it is that you want to go and do, you need to be able to talk this language as much as the next generation needs to talk Mandarin or French or anything else.
I think that's what this guy was at.
Okay, apologies there. Well, perhaps I missed that there. I apologise.
Just speak, we can all hear you.
Okay, this goes back to there. Oh yeah, to good role models. I taught in an all-girls school for a number of years, and I had a top set year 9 class who were very bright, and I was trying to encourage them to take up science. A lot of them were pushing back and saying that they weren't going to, because could they think of a good scientist? If you looked at Hollywood films or people on television, was there a good role model for a scientist or an engineer? All the scientists that they could think of in films did bad things, but then had to be counteracted by the hero. And I don't watch enough films to be able to say otherwise, but if you've got any ideas, please let me know the next time that comes up.
That's easy, Batman. But he's a scientist.
That's true.
Iron Man, obviously. Iron Man.
Yeah, look, 2 billionaires that become billionaires through science.
So, somebody seriously suggested using the Big Bang Theory as a role model.
Oh yeah. I'm not sure what teaches about gender issues though.
As someone who went to school and grew up in the 80s, I think we can say a lot of people in this audience we've witnessed this transition from a computer that's not much more powerful than a calculator all the way up to things that are extremely fast and through the ZX spectrums and ZX81s, etc. Now, I went off to uni and studied and did a PhD in biology, but now I'm running a company and 80% of my business is in electronics, and that's all self-taught electronics. We use a little board similar to PI, which is called an Arduino, which some of our people will use. And again, brilliant resources, and the Arduino is kind of like a cousin of the Raspberry Pi. It does more sort of low-tech things, but it's an incredible tool, and I really hope that these things are all going to grow together to produce results. And it's a really exciting time. So just a general comment there, really.
The discussion at the moment is assuming that people will continue to go through formal education the way they're doing at the moment in 5 or 10 years' time. Most of our discussion is about that and being concerned about inclusivity within that system. I mean, this is a question from me to the audience, it's the wrong way around. But I'd be really curious to hear people talk about that. I mean, my opinion is that one of the other impacts of technology is that people won't be going through that formal education system, and that most learning will take place outside of schools, outside of universities, and so forth. And that seems to give you a really good opportunity to you know, it's a disruptive activity, and it's those times when you have the opportunity to change these kinds of things, to change inclusivity and so on. Get an answer. I'd be curious people think.
People are only at university for 3 years. Most learning absolutely takes place outside of schools and universities already. It's invariably true. I mean, you university all your whole life.
I've already stated where I come from in industry and all that, and that's why I left the first presentation and asked the question, was it geared only for educators and qualified teachers? Because I think there's a lot of knowledge and experience out there in industry. People like myself, if I could, you be like that.
People are quite often
teach engineering and electronics.
People are.
With a company like yours.
Thank you. People are quite often under the impression that everybody in a university has a PhD. You know, everybody teaching in a university has a PhD and has a teaching qualification, and that's just not the case at all. You know, I mean, over the time when I was working on the programme I was working, I think there was about 6 different people I used regularly to come in from industry to do hands-on skills-based teaching. And it's that kind of supported study which is absolutely critical, you know, that I think is being lost from adult education. And yeah.
I think I could bring something to somewhere.
Well, come and join us.
It's interesting you said that I mean, I ran a company for 25 years, 150 odd people, and coding was the least of my problems because, to be honest, in all the companies I've invested in since, the coding has been outsourced. The big problem was the lack of business skills, project management skills, sales skills, 101 things. And this is what I said earlier, the danger here is imagining what the real pool is in the market here, what makes things work, because I'm not convinced it's coding. Because that has been commoditized in price. You go to Cambridge and it'll cost you 50 grand and a mortgage and you pay off, or you can go to other nations where it's 1/10 of the price. And every single company I'm involved in has outsourced raw coding. So, you know, I'm just incredibly worried that this is pulling in the wrong direction and ignoring all that huge pantheon of skills that we actually also need.
When we set our company up, I did it at a time when I'd watched hundreds of people in departments in the company I was working in Silicon Valley being laid off because it was just that revolution where all of the coding was outsourced. And so when we set it up, we were very clear about working out these activities are not culture specific. So we need to go to the cheapest possible place in the world to do them. And these things are culturally specific. So, you know, the content that you put into an education system, for example, that, you know, if that's going to be delivered in the US, it needs to be done by somebody from the US, maybe from the UK. But the code can be done anywhere, and you have to go where it's cheapest. And why would we want to work our way back down the food chain? You know, we don't want to put pickaxes in people's hands again when, you know.
I literally could not disagree more.
I could not disagree with you more.
but you know,
programming is a literacy,
you know,
and you should program to be programmed.
Yeah, you know, I try and hire people to do this idea that there is not a skills shortage in frontline engineering in the West. I still have a day job. I work for Broadcom. I try and hire people. It's enormously hard. We have a limitless hunger for talented engineers nearby where we can keep an eye on them, and that hunger, yeah, we could treble the number of engineers in the country, and you wouldn't sate the hunger, because what you'd create is more hunger. Actually, what you do is you just create more industries. So I know that you can outsource certain relatively low skill, relatively easy to specify tasks to low cost.
Adobe don't outsource low skill tasks to India, and Dell don't. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to finish what I was saying. I'm not suggesting that, because I think there were some people in the room who maybe thought I was suggesting that Indians are bad at programming. They're not. The problem is that if you're going to outsource, the only stuff you can effectively outsource is stuff that you can specify to a very high degree of accuracy. So effectively you can outsource stuff which you can outsource problems that you've already solved bar the typing. What you can't outsource very easily, certainly without giving away all of your company's differentiating advantage, are things which are unsolved yet, things which are investigative, unsolved yet, and which you intend to be core to your business. I think that large numbers of companies, and I think Adobe is in fact a fascinating example in exactly the opposite direction from the one you're using it in, have discovered what happens when you try and do that.
I mean, there are too many companies doing that in India and other countries now to claim that. I mean, and they're not outsourcing low-level tasks.
You're not outsourcing,
they're not outsourcing, they're moving their business.
Oh, they're moving their business out there, fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, Broadcom does fantastic chip design work in Bangalore. We have some amazing chips coming out of Bangalore. But we still have amazing chips coming out of Southern California and out of Cambridge. Sure. So it's a sort of false.
We've run out of time, I'm afraid, guys. Because we really have to finish. We're supposed to finish at 5 o'clock. I like the way we've ended this thing in an absolute explosion of a kind of words. I know. Dropped that one in like a sort of grenade at the end there. But I think it's a great way to finish. First of all, I want to thank everybody in the audience, because once we've got that going, you've got real contributions, a lot of experts in the audience as well as the panel. That was great. Thank you very, very much for coming, and more importantly, asking the questions and contributing. But also, I wonder if you give a round of applause to the guys in the panel.